Hello there, and welcome to EP.8 of Live from Vaders Castle. I'm joined today with my co-host, Dan McQuarrie.
Hello there. How are we doing?
Yeah, not too bad. How are you?
Yeah, I'm fine. I'm good. I'm ready for another exciting episode of our great podcast.
Indeed. So today we're discussing, obviously, today's episode of The Bad Batch, which we both brought up bright and early to watch.
Yep.
And then after that, discussing the Star Wars book, Light of the Jedi.
Exactly. Our first book club book, Light of the Jedi. The first book in the High Republic series / publishing initiative. I've just sort of been refreshing. I read it about 2 months ago, so I've been refreshing the last couple of days. I've reread about half of it. I'm ready to talk about it, and John himself has managed to plough through the book as well. So we're excited to discuss the book.
Yeah, I mean, I started it when we talked about it last month, and it was announced for our book club. I was like, okay, I'll start it now. I got about halfway through and like a week, and then just like put it down. And then, it's like the last week I was like, oh, I need to finish this. So I picked it back up and I've grinded my way through it.
That does happen sometimes, doesn't it? You get like halfway through and then just put it down for a bit.
Yeah.
And then you end up finishing
in the way.
Like 2 sessions.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to discussing it later, actually. It's a nice different view of the world.
It's definitely
the Star Wars universe.
Definitely plenty to discuss, yeah. But yeah, we'll kick things off talking about the Bad Batch. We've had a new episode this morning, episode 5. It was called Rampage, I think. It was called Rampage, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
And this week's episode saw them coming up against some Zygerian slavers and rescuing a Rancor, which was something quite fun, something I was interested to see. What's your overall thoughts on the episode?
Yeah, I mean, it's a fun little episode. I think it does a lot better this week to further the plot with a bit more information about like Fennec Shand and how the Bad Batch are going to like go forward in the next couple of series. I think they've set that up. I thought it was a fun episode. And what it's set up is hopefully going to pay off and things like that. Yeah,
I agree. I definitely preferred it to last week's episode. I think it was another one of those like sort of like side quest episodes that sort of develop the characters, but I felt this one actually did a better job of actually like developing the characters and the plot than last week. So I thought we got some good stuff with Omega, sort of learning a little bit more about, as you said, Fennec Shand, the bounty hunters, the underworld, and then sort of what the Bad Batch's role and place within the galaxy is going to be in sort of the coming episodes. So overall, I thought it was a fun episode. I think if I had to give it a ranking amongst the other episodes, I'd probably say first 3 above it, but then it's above episode 4. I think that's probably where I'd put it.
Yeah, I agree. That's fair. I mean, I think it's still episode 1's obviously the best, but I think what we got in this episode was better than last week. There were some nice, interesting little nods to some certain things, and I like the bit at the end. I think that helps to explain something that didn't really need explaining, but it was cool to see, which we'll get into in a minute, I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, I mean, seeing you mention it, we got a special appearance from Bib Fortuna, Jabba the Hutt's right-hand man, as he was described in this episode. It was good to see Bib Fortuna, actually. I didn't think that was a character that would pop up, but it was good to see him. It made sense that he was there with a couple of his Gamorrean guards, and he was collecting Moochie the Rancor. Now, there's a lot of discussion going on already at the moment. Is this the Rancor that Luke Skywalker goes on to slaughter in Return of the Jedi? I don't think we know.
I assume so. I just assumed it is.
Yeah, it seems like it because it's an adolescent, and then by Return of the Jedi time, it would be sort of more fully grown, so it would make sense. However, I think whether it's just a Legends thing that people have assumed is canon, or whether it was actually canon. But like, I think everyone thought then, the Rancor's name was, what was the name? Patesy or Patsy or something like that. Apparently on like on Wikipedia. So like everyone pointed out, oh no, that's not the Rancor, but it could well be. It could just be that's from Legends, and they've changed it up.
Maybe. Yeah, I mean, I think it's either the Rancor, or like it's just showing that this is something that Jabba has had for a while. Like the idea's been in his head for a while. He's like, all right, I'm going to get a Rancor, and I'm going to sacrifice people to it if they piss me off. So it's either the Rancor, or he goes through a couple before we see him in Return of the Jedi. I don't know. You have to wait and see, I suppose.
I mean, I almost thought that Bib Fortuna seemed to know the Rancor already. So could it have been that Jab already had it, and then these slavers stole the Rancor off of him, and he was just stealing it back? I don't know. I feel like if they stole it off Jabba, they might have felt a little bit more wrath than just the Bad Batch. But yeah, I thought it was at least a nice little hint that perhaps this is where the Rancor comes from. It's nice to see that connection with Bib Fortuna, and it's nice that we're sort of starting to see like the underworldy side of the galaxy again, because we sort of saw it a bit more a bit last week, and then a bit more this week. I quite like that this is where the Bad Batch is finding themselves at the moment, is involved in these underworld characters.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely seems to me at the end of the episode as well that they are going to be some underworld like mercenaries going forward, in order to make money and get information they need about the bounty hunter after them and who's hired them. So I think that's going to be a little relationship they have with the underworld, at least for the next couple episodes.
Yeah, definitely alluding to the fact that this Sid character is going to sort of be their the quest giver, so that they can earn some money as mercenaries. And I think that works quite well, because if they're, out in the Empire with no allies, it would make sense that the logical thing for them to do as skilled individuals would to take up some mercenary work.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, makes complete sense, to be fair. And I'd be interested to see where that leads them as the series goes on, because I'm assuming there's going to be a couple contracts or something maybe they aren't up for doing, because they're not actual mercenaries. I mean, they're soldiers, but they still have a moral compass, as opposed to Boba Fett or Bosk or something. So I wanted to see if there's any contracts that they don't want to do, and what sort of dilemmas that puts them in.
Yeah, I do imagine that's going to be something they're going to have to deal with, is being given sort of a bounty or a contract that they just don't want to do, because it's they're good guys at the end of the day. But this one was good. I liked sort of the fact that they were sent off to save this kid from the slavers. It was good to see the Zygerian slavers again. Obviously, they had an arc in the Clone Wars. I think they're interesting characters in the sense of they're just an empire built off of slaving. And they struggled in the Republic because it was outlawed. But now in the Empire, they think, oh, yeah, we can get away with it again. Which it's like an interesting touch to see. So it's cool to see them again with their weapons, their lassos and that. But they managed to catch the Bad Batch pretty easily.
Yeah, I mean, poor Echo got knocked off that high stand, or whatever he was. He got knocked off that, and then the rest of them fell pretty quickly afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, they did
much of a fight straight away.
Yeah, they did pretty much have a pet dragon or whatever to assist them in capturing the Bad Batch, because that thing seemed pretty obedient.
Yeah, I mean, obviously got captured, but then they rallied back. And I really liked the bit with Wrecker and the Rancor. They were scrapping. Wrecker was trying to assert dominance with the Rancor.
Yeah,
and they both wore themselves out at the end, with just big swings, exhausted swings at each other.
I like that.
Really funny.
It's good to see Wrecker get his strongman moment again after last week, after he just got his arse handed to him by Fennec Shand. It's good to see him literally just 1v1 a Rancor and come out on top.
Yeah, that's what
goes back to proving that Wrecker is the boy. I thought my overall sort of takeaway from this is that, Omega can stand up for herself pretty well. She was able to sneak off the ship away from the Zygerians. She was able to come over, infiltrate the base, sneak about, and then release the Rancor to cause some havoc. So it's good to see Omega slowly learning how to look after herself.
Yeah, that was really cool. I really like the scene near the start of the episode where she was the only one that somehow worked out that the lizard lady they were talking to was Sid. Was it Sid, the informant they're looking for? I'm sure.
I think it was Sid. Yeah.
And the other clones, like they obviously went up to her and was like, "Oh, is Sid here in this bar?" And she was just like, "No," and they just took her at her word, which is shows how new to this kind of underground world they are, I suppose. But yeah, Omega was the only one that was just like, "Oh no, you're Sid."
Yeah, because they're soldiers, aren't they? So they just sort of believe everything that's told to them. They're just like really, because like last week they didn't know how to bribe. This week they just take someone's word for like gospel straight away. So it's good to see like them learning. And then obviously in this situation, Omega like clocks on instantly. She's like, "You're Sid, aren't you?" To the little Trandoshan.
I mean, is this did she know because she knew she was lying because she's force sensitive or something? Maybe. I mean,
yeah, I feel like all
confirming
these little hints are getting left along. I don't know if I'm being completely honest. I'm almost at a point now where I'd prefer her not to be force sensitive, and these are just like talents and traits that she's had cloned into her, and she's actually just pretty switched on. I think I'd almost prefer that. I think if she ends up being force sensitive, it might just seem a little bit too similar to like Grogu. But so far, I'm liking what they're doing with Omega. I think she's actually really likable. I think her relationship with the Batch is really interesting. I really like the little bit when Sid said that Omega was smarter than all of them, and then she like Rekka gave her like a little high five in the background.
That was good, actually. I
like that. It's nice to see that sort of like brotherly relationship that those two have developed. And then obviously Hunter telling her to stay on the ship because he's too worried about her getting involved, and then they get clowned on, and then she has to come rescue them. I just think it's a nice sort of dynamic that they're developing there, where it's not just them constantly having to rescue her, like she's also doing the rescuing for them, which makes her more of an active part of the team as opposed to just a kid that they're just having to drag along with them.
No, yeah, it's nice to see her be more active and get to do more, and as you say, kind of like prove her position. Like she's not like a dead weight that they're like carrying around because they feel guilty or something. She she has that relationship with them, and they've and she pulls her own weight, sort of thing. I think they're slowly building her up to be a useful member of the team, which I'm really liking.
Yeah, definitely. I also find it quite funny in terms of parenting and questionable parenting that they're just completely fine with her just stealing this bow and arrow. But I'm sure in like further episodes she's going to learn how to use it and probably going to end up being a pretty talented marksman. But I just found it so funny that she just takes that bow and arrow and they just don't even question it. They're like, yeah, let's just give this little kid a weapon. But I guess it also shows that they're trusting her, which I think is a good step.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what comes out of that, if anything. See if she's like, a little marksman, like she becomes like the Legolas of the group.
That would be cool, actually. She's just straight up Legolas.
Just goes around working people with her laser bow. I think that'd be pretty cool.
She's gonna have to do like a skateboard moment as well. She's gonna have to slide down some stairs, like shooting with a bow and arrow at some point, just to throw back to the old Legolas.
I'd enjoy that, actually. That'd be pretty cool.
There was definitely a shot in the trailer of her like firing the bow. So, she acquired it this episode. I'm assuming she's going to start training with it now, which will be good to see. And I guess one of the bits that I just really liked was the Echo. Really sort of his, what's the word, like, because of Echo's experiences, he was the one who was most like affront to slavery. He was the one who was just like, when they were talking about because Echo, Omega didn't even know what slavery was, and then Echo was explaining it, and he was sort of really furious about the whole thing. And as soon as they had this family, like he was the one who wanted to like save them, rescue them, take them to safety. I thought Recco had Recco. I get the names so mixed up. Echo had a nice little moment in that when you can see that his experience of essentially being held as a slave for so long has really changed the way that he behaves.
Yeah. Whenever he was talking about it, though, the thing that just popped into my mind was the way he described it to Omega. It was like, that's exactly what the Kaminoans do. Like, but you know, the people they sell aren't like they're clones. Like, they're not like organic people that they've stolen from anywhere. That they create them, but then they sell them.
Yeah.
So it's like it's an interesting conversation. I think that I wish they kind of went into a bit. I wish Omega kind of was. I was expecting it to be like, that sounds like what happens with the clones. I thought,
yeah, that sounds like you guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they're humans that are bought and sold, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, I know in like previous Clone Wars stuff, like with Rex and Ahsoka, they've had that conversation about. I think it was like season. I think it's in season 7. Like, well, Rex is saying like, well, without the war, you know, we wouldn't be around. So they're bought and sold for a purpose. But then I suppose there's actually quite a nice things come out of that. So I think it's an interesting conversation that I hope that someone happens to have at some point in Star Wars about like the conversation about, you know, the clones being slaves, but then, you know, at the end of it, they had a good life.
Yeah, well, I agree. And I think
get shot.
I think the point of it is that like Echo wouldn't see himself as that, because, you know, he's actually experienced being held captive against his will and everything. And him going back to, you know, being a clone serving for him is him having his freedom again. So I feel like he'd never see it as that. But the fact of the matter is that they were humans that were sold to the Galactic Republic for money and, you know, essentially bred to be in servitude. And then even after the war has ended, as we're seeing, they sort of weren't even let free after the war ended. So I think it is an interesting point. It does make for an interesting discussion, that sort of comparison between, you know, what Star Wars actually points as like slavery. So, you know, one species holding another species captive and selling them, which is outlawed in the galaxy, versus what happens with the clones, which the Republic are perfectly happy to do, but could argue they don't have a choice to be whether they want to be sold or not. So yeah, I do think it is a very interesting topic.
Yeah, I mean, and I think it'd be a really interesting conversation. It's probably not going to happen now because obviously it's like this time has passed in Star Wars and stuff. But a really interesting conversation, I think, would be, or like an interesting point of view would be like some of the Jedi talking about it in more depth, which I wish we got. You know, maybe like Yoda or like Obi-Wan talking about. I think it'd be a really interesting conversation to have with Anakin. Actually, like maybe like Yoda or Obi-Wan having a conversation with Anakin about the clones being like slaves, etc. Obviously, because Anakin was a slave when he was a kid.
Yeah, Anakin has a particular issue whenever sort of slavery comes involved with missions and stuff. He always sort of loses his temper if there's ever like slaves on a mission, because he himself and his mother were suffered under that. Yeah,
I think it's interesting as well because I think Dave Filoni, or you know, and the people working behind definitely wrote. I feel like they definitely chose like to use this species and like at some point in this thing to really highlight things to do with like Order 66, because obviously, like as you were saying, like the clones technically are slaves, you know, they're bought and sold by the Republic, etc. But yeah, they do have like their freedoms and like they enjoy what they do. You know, they work with their friends and their brothers. Then I suppose after Order 66, now they really are like slaves. Like they, you know, have to do exactly as they're told by, you know, the Empire. All their personalities have been like basically just wiped out. And like I feel like it was an interesting episode to use those slavers and then have the way the clones are now are definitely like more slave-like than they were in the Clone Wars.
Yeah, exactly, because they were bred for a war which is now over, and now the war's over. It's just like, where's the freedom that they earned through fighting in the war?
Yeah.
People like Rex and people like the Bad Batch, they got that freedom and cut. But there's a lot of clones who are still left, and they're still serving. Then they might think because of their programming and everything that they are just purely serving. But when you sort of look at it on a bigger picture, technically, they're slaves, much like the sort of the slaves that we see in this episode. So yeah, it's interesting when Star Wars raises these sort of bigger questions, sort of bigger galaxy-wide questions. So yeah, I did think it was a fun episode, but I did think it definitely had some like character moments. We're talking about with Omega, and seeing Wrecker again scrapping. It's just definitely some good character moments. I think the last little point I'd make is they are definitely not leaving Wrecker's sore head alone, are they?
Oh no! As soon as you said it hurt again, I was like, "Oh, we're back on this." It's like every episode, I'm going to kind of try and keep an eye out to see like where they're leading.
Yeah, they're not leaving it alone.
No, so yeah, I mean, hopefully not hopefully it pays off, because that'll be sad and we don't want that to happen. But I'm interested to see where they're going with it, and I'm pretty sure our theory on it was right, that maybe further on in the series he's going to be good soldiers follow orders kind of guy.
Yeah, I'm hoping that they time that thing going wrong with Wrecker, when they bump into Rex, and Rex just instantly knows how to deal with it. He's like, "Oh yeah, get the chip out."
I hope so.
Rex has some experience with that, so I think that would be good, because we must protect Wrecker at all costs.
Yeah, I just don't want them. We've had, as you said, we had these character moments where, like Wrecker and Omega's like little high five, and like the character building moments we've had, and then I just feel like the creative team, Dave Filoni and that's going to pull it under our feet and just have him like basically turn like Crosshairs, and it's just going to be awful, because they've been building up this character relationship for like the whole series, and I reckon they're just going to pull the rug out from under us. Yeah,
I really hope they don't. Like, I think they've got a difficult job to deal with, because deciding what the ultimate fate of the Bad Batch is. I think they have this problem every time they create new characters, because they have to tie it in with what's already established, and there was no Bad Batch within our knowledge. The Bad Batch weren't cutting about in the original trilogy. So unless they sort of, go deep undercover, they're going to die eventually. So, what is going to happen there? Are they still alive at this point, or are we going to see them die in series 2, series 3? Are they slowly all going to get picked off one by one? How painful is this kid show going to end up being? Because I don't think I could take, particularly Wrecker. Hunter's my favorite, but I think Wrecker's like the most sort of lovable. I don't think I could take Wrecker dying or even turning. Both of them have got to be off the cards for me. I don't think I could handle it.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be whatever happens. I think it's going to be as tear-jerking as the end of Clone Wars. I'm pretty sure it's going to be intense.
Well, yeah, exactly. They've already put us through that. If they can't put us through something else.
Well, I mean, yeah, they did that. The end of Clone Wars was, very emotional. The end of Rebels was emotional. So I feel like we're not going to be.
Yeah, I was going to say
off so easy this time.
We had to watch Kanan Jarrus die.
Yeah, I mean,
it's just too much pain already. We can't deal with any more.
I feel like there's not going to be. I feel like they might have like a happy ending-ish, but I feel like there's going to be some tragedy in there.
Yeah, I'm sure there will be. And I guess sort of the little information that we got from Sid at the end about Fennec suggests that maybe our theory about the Kaminoans being the person who put the bounty out could be correct. Because it hasn't gone through the guild. Sid said it was a direct commission. I imagine, unless it's the Empire, and I'm still convinced it's not the Empire, I imagine this is the Kaminoans. I think it's a bit more confirmation of our theory that we had last week.
Yeah, that's what I thought when she said that. It didn't go through the guild. The Kaminoans would want to keep it on the down low. They don't want the guild knowing and then offering out to all the bounty hunters. Like they seem to do in like The Mandalorian and stuff.
Yeah, this guild, which apparently has this really strict code about only one bounty hunter being allowed on a bounty at once, but always seems to break that code.
Yeah, well, I mean, you can't trust bounty hunters, I suppose, can you? You can't trust criminals, that sort of thing. So, yeah, I think definitely the Kaminoans are probably just, phoned up. What's her name again? Oh, God, I'm trying to blank.
Fennec. Shang.
Fennec, yeah, phoned up Fennec Shang on whatever and been like, we'll give you this if you do this. Keep it on the secret, keep it on the down low, and that's your job.
Yeah, I definitely think we're actually going to get more of the underworld in this series than I was expecting, and I think that's going to be really good to see. I imagine the next few episodes are them going to be like doing jobs for this Sid to earn money and like have an ally. Obviously, I think that Sid's going to betray them because that sinister little line that she said at the end is like, "I'm good at keeping secrets." Like, we know that she is not going to keep secrets.
No, yeah. I mean, that's the problem, I think, when you have characters like the Bad Batch who are like so desperate to, they need the credits and stuff to hide, but then in order to get the credits, they have to go to someone who's like well aware of why, or like is aware that they also have a bounty on their head and that's why they need the money, sort of thing. So it's not
I think there's definitely going to be some interesting dynamics playing out. And I'm almost thinking like with a little connection here with Bib Fortuna and all that sort of stuff. I actually think Filoni has planned some like Book of Boba Fett connections, because obviously Book of Boba Fett is the next show we're getting after this. So I feel like some of these little underworldy connections is actually going to like sort of link up in Book of Boba Fett. Maybe I'm wrong, but maybe that's some of the stuff that we're starting to see.
No, yeah, that makes sense actually. Like I reckon there might be some characters we get introduced to in next couple of episodes when they start doing jobs for the underworld. That I reckon, that we'll see again probably in Book of Boba Fett or something like that. Yeah,
like surely they're going to bump into Bosk at some point. Surely they're going to like bump into maybe Dengar. There's like some of these bounty hunters, if they're operating in that underworld, they've already bumped into Bib Fortuna. Jabba's had a name drop. I feel like we're going to sprinkle some of those sort of underworldy characters in, and I think that personally, I love that idea.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to who we see, hopefully, in a couple of episodes' time.
Yeah. My final question on it: do you think we might get a little connection to like, like the Shadow Collective, Maul, Black Sun, Crimson Dawn, all of that sort of stuff? If they're getting involved in the underworld, do you think Maul's side of the underworld might creep into things?
Oh, maybe actually. I didn't even think of that. I suppose because he escaped, didn't he, at the end of season 7? So yeah, actually, he might show up, or like the definitely his like criminal underworld department, like side of his business, I suppose, might show up. Yeah, like Crimson Dawn, or
because I think from what we know, he escaped and then went back to the Shadow Collective and that sort of thing up until when we saw him in Solo. So this is the time period roughly where he would be operating as that. And if they're starting to get involved in the underworld, could we see someone like what's Paul Bettany's character from Solo? What was his name?
Oh God, I can't remember his name, but yeah, I know who you mean.
Yeah, no, I can't remember it either. But yeah, could we end up seeing characters like that sort of starting to show up? His name is Dryden Voss. There we go.
Yeah, that was it.
I was like nearly saying Quinlan Voss. I was like, it's not Quinlan Voss, Dryden Voss. There we go. Yeah. Could we see characters like that start to pop up? I hope so. I think a balance between like seeing the Empire, them being involved with the Empire, and then them being involved with like the underworld. I think that like dynamic switching up between the two, the running from both almost, I think could be could keep it really interesting.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that'd actually be really interesting. It'd be nice to see like an interesting characters like Voss or something like in a couple episodes time every now and again. I think that'd be cool.
Yeah. Hopes for next week. My hopes for next week is that we catch back up with Crosshair. because it's been 2 episodes in a row now that we haven't seen what's going on with like Target and Crosshair, all that stuff. So I'm hoping next week we get that sort of subplot again, like we got in episode 3.
Yeah, actually, no, I agree. That'd be interesting to see what they're up to at the moment. Tarkin and Crosshair. That'd be nice to see.
And then I'm hoping we catch up to Rex sooner rather than later. I know we say this every week, and then it's another week we don't see Rex, but I kind of just want to see my boy now.
Yeah, hopefully soon. Hopefully not have to wait too much longer.
Yeah. But anyway, overall, good episodes. Another good episode. I think it was probably one of the really fun episodes. I think like the fight sequence with Rancor and everything, really good fun. Some fun moments in there, some good character moments. So overall, I'm pleased where things are going at the moment.
Yeah, me too. I enjoyed the episode. I think it was cool. Some nice nods in it. Some good character moments. So yeah, I'm enjoying it still.
Yeah, I'm still sort of waiting for the pace to pick up a bit. But this is always what happens in like the first season of an animated show. It sort of like starts off quite big, and then it takes a little lull, and then it picks back up again. And I wouldn't say it's too much of a lull like it was in other shows, but I do think like the pace needs to pick up a little bit. So I'm hoping like next week or the week after we do start to ramp up the pace a little bit.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Right. So I reckon we'll probably wrap up talking about Bad Batch just there. Had a little bit of a discussion on it. If there's anything that sort of crops up in next week's episode, you know, that sort of links back to this week's episode, we might pick up a few more dangling threads next week. But for the remainder of this episode, we're gonna do our book club, which the book that we have read the last month is Light of the Jedi by Charles Soule. It is the first book in the High Republic series, the first book of the first wave of the first phase. They've broken it down quite a lot here. It is the adult. So in each, for those of you who haven't been reading the High Republic, they're doing like 3 phases over like the next 3 years. So we're told each phase is going to have like 3 waves of books. And then in each wave of book, there's going to be an adult novel, a young adult novel, and well, in America, they call it middle grade, but it's like young reader. So in this first wave, we got Light of the Jedi by Charles Soule, Into the Dark by Claudia Gray, and A Test of Courage by Justina Ireland. Light of the Jedi, obviously being the adult novel, is the big one. In each wave, the adult novel will be the big one with a big plot, and then the other 2 sort of tie into it. So this was the first book of the High Republic that anyone got the chance to read when it came out in February, I want to say. I think it came out end of January. But we've just got around to discussing it now. John, this is your first dive into Star Wars bookness. Give me all your thoughts. I want to hear overall thoughts on your first experience of the High Republic. I very much enjoyed it. Like I found that this era of Star Wars is very interesting. Obviously, I think it's in the inside cover of the novel, or it might be on the back. You have Obi-Wan's quote of 1,000 years ago, Jedi were like, for 1,000 generations, the Jedi Knights were the guardians of peace and justice in the galaxy. Yeah, and I think it's really interesting because this is I think this is definitely in the era where what the Jedi are, what they're originally meant to be. And I think what we were talking about last week about how at the end of Return of the Jedi, this is what Luke realized and stuff, that, the Jedi of this era are very much peacekeepers, like they aren't the warriors and the, army leading generals that we've seen in like the Clone Wars, which is where we've seen most of our Jedi action. So I find this era of the Jedi very interesting, and just how like they interact with things and like how they talk to each other, or like I tell you what I love about the having to be able to sit the opposite, having it in a book form, is just in how much detail you can get about like each different Jedi's like connection to the Force, and like how Charles Soule's written the like how they use the Force. 'Cause obviously, you watch it in a film on like Anakin will like pick up a rock, or they'll do like whatever. But in the novel and in the books, you can really understand about how the Jedi like feel the Force, so that it's really personal to them, and how like they're not just
it's not like a bit of telekinesis where they just like flip things about and stuff. You have to like feel the force through you and stuff like that, and how your emotions tie into it and stuff. I found it absolutely fascinating, like reading that.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, we are going to go into big spoilers. So if you haven't read the book, do prepare yourself. But just picking up on that point you just said, one of my absolute favorite things about this book is how Charles Soule wrote about the Force, and the fact that like each Jedi saw the Force differently. So there was that sort of chapter when Avar Kriss was, getting all the Jedi together to move the Tabana gas out the way of the sun during the Great Disaster, and it was sort of listing that like she sees the Force as a song, as like music. You got like Bel Zettifar, who sees it as a flame. Elzar Mann sees it as like an endless ocean, and Buriaga sees it as like a tree. I just thought that was so interesting. I've like never heard of that before in Star Wars, but yeah, it makes perfect sense that like each Jedi sees the Force in a different way. And I just thought that was such an interesting aspect. And sort of, as you said, on the wider point, like, it's why I'm absolutely obsessed with this era at the moment, is this is what the Jedi should have been, and they never were in the films that we've seen, in the the content we've seen so far. This is what the Jedi were meant to be. It's not just the fact that they were peacekeepers, but they were more free thinking. Like the Jedi Order was so dogmatic in the prequels. They had such strict rules, but in this one they were sort of allowed to be a bit more free thinking, a bit more experimental with the Force, like relationship. Like they were sort of encouraged to look out for each other in a way that I never really saw in the prequels. Like as soon as they went to sort of help each other, Yoda would always be like, "Oh, attachments." Where like in this one, obviously attachments were still forbidden and stuff, but there was that scene where Loden Greatstorm was talking about why they kept Ember, the Charhound, and they were saying that technically attachments were forbidden, but they said he was a member of the outpost, therefore they had to look out for him. And I just thought there was so much of that, of like Jedi sort of like bending the rules to bending the rules, but in a way that was like not frowned upon, but actually like encouraged. Like the Jedi were like actively encouraged to sort of, be a bit more free thinking within the rules. It was much less dogmatic, and they were just more, I guess, experimental with like the Force and like the way that they sort of had a place within the galaxy, but still didn't want to be warriors. Like there was a whole Jedi Council meeting that went on and on just to decide whether they would be involved in that one battle at the end, whether they were going to send one ship in, because that's not their role. But the Republic didn't force them to do it. They decided on their own whether they were going to support the Republic. And I think just seeing that difference between the Jedi of old and the Jedi of new, I guess, was one of my favorite aspects of the book and the wider High Republic story, I think.
Yeah. It just made me like one of my favorite Jedi. I don't know. I'm sure I mentioned it before on the podcast. One of my favorite Jedi from like the prequels and stuff is like Plo Koon, and like I always found like because he was like a Jedi who like just seemed like he was very like he just cared about people and like everything around him and stuff like that. He cared about the clones, he cared about Ahsoka. He was just very caring and loving. Which I feel like was missing from a lot of some of the other Jedi in the prequel era, who were more focused on like fighting the war, winning the Clone Wars and stuff like that. So I feel like all the aspects I actually really liked about like Plo Koon and like, some of the other top Jedi like Obi-Wan and like Ahsoka and stuff, all those things that make them like characters people love and like great Jedis, is basically like how the entire Jedi Order operates in the High Republic.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So I actually think this could be one of my favorite eras in Star Wars if it keeps up with the how it's been so far. It's such a good story. Yeah,
and like I think if you're really into the era and really into the Jedi, I think you'd love Into the Dark, because in Into the Dark I think they introduce another 4 Jedi characters, all of which are very like unique in their own way, but they all are sort of that same level of like, I almost think that like, Qui-Gon was like, he was a High Republic Jedi, but he was like 200 years too late.
Yeah.
You know, he would have fit in perfectly back then. He would have been on the council. He would have made Master, or, you know, all the things that Qui-Gon didn't achieve in Phantom Menace because he didn't quite agree with the council. He would have been fine with back in the High Republic because they operated how he believed they should operate. You know, the relationship between light and dark wasn't so like dogmatic either. Like they, you know, there was still the stuff that they didn't do, but like there was almost an acceptance of just like keeping that balance between light and dark instead of this sort of really dogmatic idea of just like good, light, good, dark, bad sort of thing.
Yeah, I feel like, yeah, you're right. I mean, in the prequels and stuff like the Jedi Council, I feel like there was always just like a straight line that was like, all right, you can't do any of this past this point because, you know, and like what Yoda says to Anakin and Attack of the Clones maybe, or no, Revenge of the Sith, you know, about attachments leading to like jealousy, like hate, etc., etc., etc. And it's just like they were so, yeah, like worried and dogmatic about like doing things that actually, I mean, forming attachments in a way that I think they have in Night of the Jedi, like makes them, you know, better Jedi. That's what you need, to form attachments to things and to people in order to, you know, show that you care about them and things like that. And I think that's what got lost by the time we get to like the prequels. It's so like, you know, you can't form attachments with people. Like it's so, there's such like a fine line that they were just like, you can't cross this. Well, they're like, yeah, as you were saying, in this era, there's a bit more flexibility and like you can like do this, but as long as you like, I think it's just the point of like, as long as you, and everything you do is with, you know, love and care and you're trying to help people, you can do like whatever you want, I suppose.
Yeah, and I think it's like it's like that idea of protecting life is like so central to them. You know, I guess we'll talk about the Great Disaster. You know, the Great Disaster, when the Jedi get involved, everything they do in that whole thing is about protecting life. You know, they're constantly making these tough decisions to save more lives. You know, there's moments where it's like, can we really do this? Can we as a whole Jedi Order collectively push something out of space? How many of us are going to die trying to do it? But they're all up for the task straight away because the amount of lives they can save. And that's just a side of the Jedi, which I know that was always the core, but it almost feels a bit lost when you see like the Clone Wars and stuff that, you know, they're almost fighting a war for politics' sake. And it's just like, no, the Jedi were always meant to save lives. That they were peacekeepers, they were guardians. And I think seeing that, you know, particularly in the Great Disaster, I was just reading it and I was thinking, oh, this is what Luke Skywalker's Jedi Order would have been if Kylo Ren hadn't burnt it to the ground.
Yeah, I just had an interesting brainwave where you were talking there about like protecting life and stuff, and I was like, you know, the arc in the Clone Wars, the Darkness on Umbara arc. I don't think Pon Krell would have got anywhere near, or like he would have been kicked out of the Order straight away if it had been like how it was in the High Republic times. But obviously, because he won battles and stuff, the Jedi didn't care, even though, you know, he was killing like, or under his watch, like twice as many clones were dying or something like that. I feel like under the High Republic watch, someone would have definitely pulled him up by now and looked into it more, because yeah, obviously protecting life is the like main goal of the Jedi Orders. And I think definitely by the time we get to the prequels, that is lost. And as the prequels go on and the Clone Wars go on, it becomes more about just winning a fight instead of like protecting the life around it, sort of thing. That makes sense.
And I think what like all the High Republic writers have said in interviews and stuff is like the story they're essentially telling is how the perfect idealistic Jedi eventually would turn into the Jedi that we see in the prequels. And the prequels are still 200 years away from Light of the Jedi. So obviously there's going to be a lot that's going to happen, a lot which is going to change. But I think the High Republic story we're going to see is we're going to start to see those like changes in the Jedi Order, which is going to ripple on towards the prequel time. I think we're going to start to see something is going to happen, which is going to make them change the way they think. And I think we are going to see that at some point further down the line in these stories. But yeah, I agree with you completely. This era has completely captivated me in the sense of like what the Jedi should be. And that's what I really love. In terms of saving lives, we were talking about saving lives. For a Star Wars book, there's a lot of lives that don't get saved in this one.
Oh God, yeah. Like, that really
great
surprised
disaster really is a disaster.
Yeah, I mean, that really shocked me while I was reading it. Just like how many, like you just assume that you're reading something and like someone's in a bit of like a life or death situation or something. You just assume that something will come along, like the next paragraph, and like save them or something. But there were so many instances where it just didn't happen and someone just died. I was like, oh.
And then
okay.
There were just instances where like 1 million people died in a paragraph. After they stopped the great disaster on Hetzel, there was the first emergence on, I think the planet was called Abdalis. Mm-hmm. And then the paragraph just ended like 1 million lives, like millions of lives were lost. And I was like, right, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like a serious disaster.
Yeah. And I mean, later on in the book, when I can't remember the guy's name, one of the guys, the top leaders of the Nil.
Yeah, Kassav, yeah.
Yeah, is he a Twi'lek?
No, is he? I think Lorna D's the Twi'lek, I think.
Twi'lek.
I can't remember what Kassav is. But
like
when you're talking about when he's extorting the planet and then fails to destroy the emergence and then just like 1 billion people die or something.
Yeah, it was something, I think it was something like 20, it was either 20 million or 20 billion. Like the emergence like struck a moon and like basically just wiped out everyone on the moon. And it was like, oh, okay. Well, that's happened.
This like I remember when I started reading the book, I was just like, right, normally these stories like they start to, they grow a little bit over time. First chapter it's like we meet this captain, get to know the captain. We're like, oh, I'm quite liking this captain. Captain Hedda Cassett, she's flying the Legacy run. It all seems to go well. She's meeting all the children on the plane. You're like, oh, this is nice. This is cool. All dead, like by the end of the first chapter. And I was like, right, okay, this is serious. And then the next chapter, we meet a nice guy. Like he's a scan tech. He's got a girl back at the bar that he drinks at. He's going to ask her out for dinner. He's dead. And I'm like, right, okay. It's like one after the other, like dropping like flies. I'm like, Jesus. They do not shy away from heavy stuff in this.
Yeah, I think it was his death, the scan technician guy, because he was like so optimistic about finishing his shift, going down, like talking to that woman at the bar, etc. He seemed like he had a nice plan for what he was going to do. And then, just dead. I was like, oh, right. I was like, this is serious stuff. Like, this is not a kid's like the normal like trial kind of kid friendly like Star Wars that we're used to. It was like a lot of people were dead.
It's funny. I was chatting to Jack about it when he was reading it, and he's not quite finished it, but he was saying that when he read the first few chapters, he was just like, "Dan, there's so much death." And I was like, "Yeah, that's the reason why they called it the Great Disaster. It really was like significant." But then I think it also, the scale of the death also highlights the importance of the Jedi, because the amount of people who don't die because of the Jedi's actions is pretty significant as well.
Yeah, I mean, in that moment, when all the fragments from the ship, from the Legacy run, come out onto the system, and was it the fuel that's going to run into the moon? Not the moon, the
it's
sun.
the Tabana gas, which is just going to destroy everything.
Which one of the science guys says is basically going to create a chain reaction in the sun and basically blow up the whole system. So then, the Jedi all link together and use a force push, I suppose, on the tank to move it out of the way of the sun. So that is billions of lives.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite chapters in the entire book. Like the way it's just written is so beautiful. Because like Ava Chris, who I love, by the way, she's such a cool Jedi. She has this really unique ability to sort of connect the Force between other Jedi. It's sort of like in Legends, there was like a battle meditation, which was a thing. But in this, it sort of much more than that. It's just like, it's almost like walkie-talkies between Jedi, but it's like they can sense each other and she can help create that connection. And I thought, oh, that's really cool. That's a really nice concept. She can sort of like oversee the battle using connection. That's cool. But then they took it one step further, and it was like she's gonna single-handedly connect every single Jedi, not just who was on Hetzal Prime, but you even get a bit where Master Yoda, like on the other side of the galaxy, like tunes in to help, and they're all just gonna nudge the exact same point all at once to like push the gas out of the way of the sun. And it's all about the music and the song and all that sort of stuff. But like Jedi drop in left, right, and center because it takes so much concentration, and that like the whole like the collective sort of sigh of relief you get at the end when they actually manage to do it. Like, you can feel it. Like, you're just like, oh my God, you put the book down and you're like, oh, thank goodness for that. They did it.
Yeah, that was such a cool moment. And yeah, as you said, the way it was written was, it is actually really, beautiful to have each, because you obviously have Ayla Chris. Is that Ava Chris? Ava Chris is like interpretation of the Force as a song and etc. But then as the book goes on, you get different, some of the more focused story-driven Jedi in this arc, because there's a lot of them that are just kind of like, it just says a Jedi or something like. But there's the ones that are named get their own little couple sentences about their point of view on it, and like their Force view on it and how that is for them. And
I particularly like Elzar Mann. I like him a lot as a character anyway, because he's like the bit of the rogue Jedi who's always off doing his own thing, and he's always getting himself in trouble, and he hasn't quite made master because he's always doing that sort of thing. But I like his sort of seeing it as like an endless sea. I thought that was really cool, and he made quite a significant contribution to the Force push as well in the Great Disaster. So yeah, I thought that bit was really good. I'm sort of looking at time, so I'm going to press on to something else. I'm going to talk about what one of my favorite storylines throughout the book, and I'm sure you probably agree with Bell Zettifar and Loden Greatstorm. I love these two characters so much.
Yeah, they are. You've got Loden Greatstorm, who's the Jedi Master, and then Bell, who is his Padawan, and I think they have such a good relationship about how the main challenge, I suppose, that Bell has the whole book pretty much is his Force falling sort of thing, or not hitting the ground at terminal velocity sort of thing.
Safe landings basically.
Yeah. And the whole book, his master's trying to get him to I think the first time I see it, they jump out of his ship.
Yeah, they jump out the little vector during the Great Disaster.
Yeah, jump out. Yeah, and Bell doesn't manage to slow himself, so Loden has to catch him. And then later on in the book, I think Loden just pushes him off a cliff, pretty much.
Yeah, when they're on Elfrona, which is where the majority of their story takes place. At the Jedi outpost there. Yeah, Loden just full on just pushes him off the edge of a cliff, and then has the other Jedi, Indira, just waiting at the bottom to catch him.
Yeah. But obviously because as much as it is dark and sad in some points of the book, obviously because it is a Star Wars book and it's meant to be enjoyed, he does eventually get the hang of it.
Yeah, and I really love that moment because it's pushing towards the end of the story when he has the kid that he's rescued, that the Nile have taken the family hostage, and he sort of jumps out the ship with this kid, and he has to save him the fall now, because it's not just him, but it's this kid as well, and that's what gives him the push to finally save him, to fix the landing. But yeah, I really loved their master and apprentice connection, because he was there were parts of the book when he was saying that just every day is impossible because it's just Loden constantly forcing impossible tasks on him, getting him to just come up with a solution. But I just think that Loden is such an interesting Jedi because he's just yep, that's how you learn.
Yeah, I think he's one of the great characters in the book. Just the way his relationship with him. And then just he got a yellow lightsaber as well, I'm pretty sure, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah, he does. He looks really cool. He's on the cover of the book.
Yes.
He's a really cool looking Jedi. And one of my favorite moments, such a small moment, but when they're during the Great Disaster, when they're trying to let all the people into the pleasure cruiser, when they're getting kept out the fortress, there's all these marauders like shooting at them. And he just says, oh yeah, they'll just like keep reflecting their bullets for a while. And then he uses the force to pick all of them up, just drop them. Like none of them die, they all just get injured, and he spends so much time in that fight trying to ask people to like surrender so he doesn't have to scrap them. But as soon as he has to scrap them, he's just like, yeah, I'll just lift them all up and drop them.
Yeah, I mean, again, that links back to what we were talking about earlier. Like, that was like the last resort. I mean, he went up to like the gate with the guards and stuff and tried to talk them down, and they were like, no. And then obviously when the Marauders turn up, he's trying to get them to surrender. And it's like, well, as soon as they start, trying to kill people and stuff, that's when they're like, he's like, okay, I need to actually, fight. Yeah.
And then I think one of the other characters I really, really liked, which is part of their storyline, was Porter Engle. The Blade of Bardotta. Because you meet him at the beginning, he's like a 300-year-old Jedi. He's quite comical, like he's serving them this stew and he's sort of the chef of the Jedi outpost. And then you get to him actually having to fight. And he just dominates, doesn't he? He's a savage.
Yeah, I really enjoyed reading his fight scenes. I hope we get to see more of it, because it is very much alluded to that he's I thought he was one of like the best warriors the Jedi had.
Like an absolute legend of the Order.
When it came to it. Yeah, and I'm really excited to see, hoping the next book or the one after or something, or in some different media, see him at like full fury going for it.
I imagine that, like, obviously the Rising Storm, which is the sequel to like the Jedi, is coming out next month. And a lot of the reviews are out for it already, and a lot of the reviews say that like a lot of the characters you love from the first book you see again. So I do imagine we'll see like the likes of like Porter Engle and Bell again. And I guess we're definitely going to see Loden again, because, at the end of the book, Loden gets captured by Marchion Ro, and he gets a pretty savage sort of almost torture. He's at the end of the book, when Marchion Ro's basically just saying like, "Oh, you're going to help me out here. Like, I'm not scared of the Jedi. I'm going to Well, let's just talk about the villains. Obviously, the Nile was sort of the wider villain, but then Marchion Ro himself, the leader of the Nile, sort of reveals himself by the end of the book of being like the villain. You sort of first meet him, he's the Eye. He's like got these three sort of nutty Tempest runners who are all just ready to fight, and then he's sort of there. They don't answer to him technically, but he gives them the paths, so they basically answer to him. But by the end of the book, he sort of really reveals himself that he orchestrated the Great Disaster. He orchestrated everything, and he's the real villain. And he's just got this family-long feud with the Jedi, which we have no idea what that is. What did you think of him as a villain?
I thought it was really good, actually. Like, because as you said, he was the Eye, and like the people below him, like, kind of answered to him, kind of didn't. Obviously, he had stuff that they wanted, so they kind of did what they were told. But then, as the book goes on, he becomes more and more dominant, and at the end, he's like the big bad. He's captured Loden. He seems to have some sort of family-long hatred for the Jedi.
And he's got a weird purple artifact as well, which has been the talking point for many months in the community. And what on earth is this purple artifact? I think there's a lot of theories of whether this is somehow Sith related. I imagine it could be, perhaps. We'll have to wait and find out. But I thought he was a really interesting villain, because not only is he very smart, steps ahead of everyone sort of thing, a lot of power, uses the chaos of the Nile to just do so much damage, but he just has no fear of the Jedi. Like, he completely is just like, they can come at me. I don't fear them. And I think the whole question of the High Republic is, if the Sith weren't around, what would actually be a good villain for the Jedi? And I just think like the chaos of the Nile combined with their leader just being completely like, I don't fear you guys. You should fear me. I think is a really strong villain.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to the next book to see how. I mean, I want to see what his like plan is, I suppose, and why he needed why he needed to capture a Jedi. And then I'm just trying to see what he does next. Because, yeah, as you said, it is a big question of, without the Sith, what challenges the Jedi. So I'm really interested to see what sort of plans he comes up with in the next book, and how he is a big pain in the Jedi's side, I suppose.
Yeah, and I think the big thing that the Nihil have going for them, which is a really huge part of this book, is their ability to create these paths, these like side road hyperspace like jumps where they can sort of just jump in and out. They don't use typical hyperspace lanes, and hyperspace became a really big theme of this book. I didn't really expect that coming into it, but we got a bit of a connection. You got Mari Santeca, who's a part of the Santeca clan, who obviously Lor Santeca is the guy from The Force Awakens right at the beginning who knows Luke Skywalker. So there's that little connection. But the Santecas are like the hyperspace prospectors. They planned all the routes. But now we find out that one of the Santecas has this ability, which sounds like some sort of force sensitivity, where she can create paths for the Nihil, so they can just jump in and out of somewhere. They can just jump in, kill loads of people, and jump out without having to use like pre-existing hyperspace routes. And obviously that was how the Great Disaster happened. That was how they fought in the battle. We haven't even got to the battle yet, but they just used little paths to jump and smash into ships and stuff like that. I think that makes them really difficult villains to deal with, and I'm really excited to see where they take that.
Yeah, me too. I mean, it's very hinted at that. Well, they talk about how like hyperspace is so new and stuff. So I'm really interested to see like how that develops to be like the hyperspace we get in all the media we've seen so far. I'm really interested to see where they go with it, and how they intertwine the paths and hyperspace into like, I suppose, like the storyline.
Yeah, and I think it was really interesting because like the middle chunk of the book was sort of a mystery of putting together, what happened with the Legacy run, where the emergencies are going to come out. Can they get the flight recorder to figure out what happened, who's to blame, etc., etc. Find out it was the Nihil, obviously. When they have that little moment where Buriaga like chats to the kid, and the kid says that he like saw the 3 strikes of lightning on the Legacy run before it blew up. So it's all like a constant mystery, which I think is really interesting. But they're dangerous. They're not to be messed with. They're not just these like crazy Vikings, like space Vikings, but they have a power that the Jedi don't have, and I think that's what makes them pretty difficult. Yeah,
that's a good point, actually. I mean, yeah, I suppose the view of the Jedi in that point in time is that, if a Jedi shows up, they'll do whatever they need to do. Like, they can do whatever they need to get their task on a win, from the point of like most people. So yeah, I suppose having a villain with like a power the Jedi don't have, because the Jedi seem all powerful to everyone. That's actually quite interesting. And I'm looking to see, I'm excited to see just what they do with it in the next book.
Yeah, and it's certainly like, there's a lot of, obviously we meet the new Chancellor, who is a much better Chancellor than Palpatine ever was. But like the Republic really seems to care, and really seems to want to make the galaxy a better place. And then you have these villains who are just the complete opposite. They just want to destroy everything and turn it into chaos. So I do think it's going to set up a lot of really good conflict to come. But I mean, there's so much more we could talk about, and don't know even if we have the time to talk about it. So we might have to come back to it in another episode to pick up some of the other plot points. But obviously the big battle, the Battle of Kerr, there's a lot that goes on there, with Skier losing his arm and Master Jorah Malai dying. A lot of that stuff continues on in some of the books and comics, John, if you want to keep up with that.
I will.
And then, obviously Avar Kriss and Elzar Mann, they have an interesting relationship, very close friendship. Is it pushing on a romance at some point? I could almost see it, but obviously it's forbidden within the Order. And then I think, I guess mentioning Elzar Mann, he has this big vision right at the end of the book of, the Jedi dying and there being a lot of fear and suffering. So I imagine that's probably the Nihil causing a lot of trouble.
Yeah, I have to assume so. I'm really excited to see what they put in the next book. Like, I can't wait for it to come out so I can find out what happens next and learn more about the Republic, because I find it such a fascinating time in the Star Wars universe.
Yeah. No, I'm glad you enjoyed it. I think what we'll just do is we'll just have some sort of segments of podcasts over the next couple of weeks, just sort of like talking about like the High Republic bits and bobs, because there's some stuff from this book that we haven't even had a chance to talk about, and sort of more bits and bobs that like you could now go and read you could catch up on the High Republic comics now that you've read Light of the Jedi as well, because it kicks off just at the end of this book where they open up the Starlight Beacon, so you can now jump into that. So yeah, I think we'll keep it as an ongoing discussion, because the High Republic is like, it's definitely the big thing which is going on at the moment, and it hasn't let me down yet. I'm very intrigued about the future of it.
Yeah, me too.
Right, so we'll call it there. That was our first book club book review. I think overall, by the sounds of it, very positive for both of us. I mean, for me, I've read quite a few Star Wars books. It's definitely in my top 3. I think it's probably my second or third favorite book. John, it being your first one, it's probably your favorite.
So far, yeah.
So yeah, we'll give you guys a new book next week. Give us a week just to figure out what we're going to do next, and we'll give you a new one next week that we'll then talk about in the month after that next week. And then we'll keep this going, because it was a fun segment. It was a fun thing to talk about. And then we'll be back next week to talk about the next episode of The Bad Batch. And probably, as have the last couple of weeks, we end up doing about half hour on Bad Batch. We'll probably chat more about the High Republic next week, because there's all sorts to dig into. Yeah, sounds good. Looking forward to it. Perfect. Well, we'll wrap up there. It's been a fun episode. Thanks for listening. If you could, if you want to hear more from us, check us out on Instagram at Live from Vaders Castle, and on Twitter at Vaders Castle Pod. Fairly active on Instagram, posting all sorts of stuff over there. So if you give us a follow, and let us know if you're enjoying the podcasts, and we'll be back next week. Yeah. See you next week. Thank you for listening. See you next week. Yeah. Cheers. Bye.